Good evening and welcome to tonight's conversation about what is the hybrid church. Thanks for joining us. The easiest way to answer what the hybrid church is saying that it's a sort of mix between an in-person church experience as well as an online virtual experience. But at a recent training that our other presenter, Wayne Wilkins, and I were at, they used a wonderful metaphor that can help us understand, and I'm going to use my background to capture that metaphor. What they said the hybrid church is like is a day at the beach in a way. And what that means is that when you glance out at the vastness of the ocean represents the online or virtual expression of the church. Then when you look on the shore where the waves lap against the sand, that is the place where the online worshiping community or the online church begins to meet or interact with the in-person experience. And the third and final location in the hybrid model would be the beach itself, which is that place where traditionally we are used to hanging out, and that is the physical or in-person church. Now, the reason that I use this picture in particular is that the hybrid church will have different responses from different people based on how they're feeling. Some people, for instance, will be like the young woman that you see whose legs are over the sand. They're going to be firmly entrenched on the beach, not yet willing or able to venture out. So they will be locked into an in-person experience. Other folks will be like that couple that you see near the top of the screen. They're ready to go and get a flavor of both in-person as well as virtual worship experiences. And there's even going to be some folks like the figures that you see at a blur at a distance who are firmly entrenched in the ocean waters, meaning their primary or exclusive experience of church will be online or virtual. So that picture reminds us of the challenge before us of living into the hybrid church experience, of providing each of the audiences with the nourishment of what they need in order to connect with the body of Christ. So having said that, I'm going to introduce, or at least invite our guest speaker this evening, Wayne Wilkins, to introduce himself. And he will lead you with in the exploration of a couple questions. What is hybrid exactly? And what elements in the life of the church will carry through and become a part of this thing called hybrid church?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Wayne Wilkins. Thank you very much, Pastor Craig, and welcome. We're going to talk on our journey so far and what we've experienced having implemented some of these hybrid concepts into our service. So firstly, what is hybrid church? What does it mean? And obviously the word hybrid is two things coming together. What do we need to be hybrid? So it's actually a combination of an in-person experience and an online experience. Now, we've all been through this last year where we've been lucky enough to have a pastor that's led the way and introduced an online experience for everyone. So I think a couple of key concepts for us is to think about this. Virtual is not the opposite of real, it is the opposite of physical. And we have to acknowledge in this day and age, actually, there have been people who have made lifelong friendships, through Facebook. There's another concept of church online versus online church. And then with that comes making content or live streaming our church service on Sunday. Now, what we can do with this hybrid combination is also maybe have some, what we're going to call content that actually lives online, which can go way beyond just, Sunday morning worship. Our mission statement, we are called by God to develop educational and outreach programs for youth, minister to the needs of people in our communities. And what we're finding, this gives us the opportunity to reach more people, and we can speak our message to people wherever they are. There are some things that maybe won't work in a hybrid situation that we'll have to be specific about and maybe separate. And we heard this great story when Pastor Craig and myself were on a course just learning more about everyone else's experience in this world of hybrid church, where the pastor said his wife was pregnant and she was craving dates when she was pregnant. And he went and got her dates, and they both had shared dates together, and they quite enjoyed it. And then as she progressed through that pregnancy, she then started craving peanut butter with those dates. And his reaction to that was, oh, why would we do that? Why would you want to try, when something's so perfect already, why would you want to introduce peanut butter to that? And I mean, surely that's not going to taste good. They're trying that together, and that tasted very good, right? So on the flip of that, maybe you keep something separate. And he used the example of watermelon and peanut butter. And those things don't go quite so well together, and they're best kept separate. They both individually taste amazing, together, not so good. You know, coffee hour. How does coffee hour work when you've got like everyone together in church, and then you've got like a big online community also? How do you make them feel included? Do you do that as one process? Maybe. Is it best kept separate? So in hybrid church terms, that might be we make a Zoom room that's a separate room for our online community, and people can choose to be there, or they can choose to be in the in-person worship. So there are some things that we're still discovering and we're thinking through, but the conclusion is maybe some things are better kept separate and won't work together. Really, we're creating spaces for a wide experience, and that is the goal of hybrid church.
Thank you so much, Wayne, for that introduction, looking deeper into what is a hybrid church. Now, the next essential component to thinking about a hybrid church has to do with moving beyond just the worship experience into other ways that the community will be shaped and reformed by this notion of being hybrid. And in order to hold ourselves accountable, because the concern they had is if churches are not intentional, they will become tilted in one particular direction and give preference to one of the communities over the other. Either most things that are offered will be in person, or perhaps they'll go too far in the opposite direction and put most of their programming just online. So in order to keep a sense of balance in creating a hybrid church, they said that a local church community should create a sheet with 4 separate headings or columns. And I'm going to share my screen and talk about those 4 areas with you briefly. The first area of ministry a church should consider are those ministries that will be online only. Now, I'll give you an example from WHCC's experience. During the COVID experience, we started a Sunday evening Introduction to 12 Steps group. Now, that is a group where there's a high premium on anonymity, and folks who might benefit from the program may be far, far beyond the reaches of Woodland Hills or even Los Angeles. So that sort of a program offering would be perfectly suited to be an online only ministry on Sunday evenings. The second kind or column of ministry would be ministries that began online first, but then could grow to include in-person participants. So let me give you an example from WHCC's life. We started, for instance, on weekdays, a daily coffee from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Now, once the stay-at-home order is lifted this month, actually in the next 48 hours, we may be able to have coffee experiences where some would gather for coffee on the church campus or even at the local Starbucks, while others might join online as well, and mixing the communities together. But that ministry began online, but then expanded. The third column for ministries that we should consider would be what are called in-person first ministries, meaning these ministries were designed first and foremost to be done in person, but then expanded and included an online presence. Perhaps the greatest example of that would be our Sunday morning worship experience, for it was created over 70 years ago, 1947, as an in-person only experience, but over these last 16 months, we've expanded it to include the online community. And finally, the fourth type of ministry that a church should have would be some ministries that are in person only. Those might be sensitive ministries like a finance committee meeting, or in some cases, either a church council or leadership team meeting. They would be meetings where there is not an online presence that's invited into the room in order either for sake of confidentiality or other issues of appropriateness. But what they said is that an effective local church will keep this sheet of paper in front of it and will strive to maintain as much balance between those four areas as possible. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen and I will turn things back over to Wayne as he talks about some what they called framing concerns that we need to keep in mind as we do ministry. And he'll also address some of the online platforms that could be used to take WHCC's ministry out into the world.
Okay, so with this framing section, there are three main points that we want to share with you. The first is accessibility. The second is how engaging is what we're doing with our community. And the third is empathy. So let's talk on accessibility. In this day and age, we need to be available for people even if they physically can't be present. We're trying to provide a service and a message to our community. And like we said in our mission statement, we want to be able to reach the youth. We want to be able to reach people in our local community. And so we have to be wherever they are. The second thing is how engaging is this with people? Now, there are a few things we're going to be introducing into our service, like one of the main things would be cameras. Usually people would not see cameras in church. They'd be hidden, maybe they'll be at the back or they'll be on the ceiling. And most people aren't used to seeing a camera in the service. And in some ways, it can be seen as a distraction. We can look at it with a different perspective and look at it and say, well, actually, this camera represents the people at home. We're dealing with something that would otherwise be intrusive, and it's actually something that maybe we should welcome. When we get to the service, when we're sharing peace, maybe we can pass that camera into the congregation and those people can feel part of that experience with us. This would make somebody that's at home feel like they're part of the worship on Sunday morning. What would it look like, let's say, if on the back wall of the church, we can see everyone's face at home, much like we're doing now on Zoom or what we've been used to? Is it something that people would enjoy seeing? We've got a constant reminder that we've got like an online family too, when we can see everybody and everyone can see us. Empathy. Now, what we've all been through this last year, we all know what it's like to be at home and view the service and be on Zoom looking at our church service every Sunday from a computer screen. So what the pandemic's actually done for us has given us more empathy. We can be of more service if people feel connected to us. So maybe it's time to think about what the 22nd century would look like. We're already kind of in the 21st century. What's the 22nd century going to look like for everybody? Zoom is a place where people have been using it and happy to use it. So we can make that at least our starting platform of preference, if you like, just because there's a momentum there and people seem comfortable with it. There's a way of raising hands and interacting that way. We can make breakout rooms. We can get separate Zoom rooms. I mean, maybe we can even teach, our youth group there might be some young people that can't be there. We can have a separate room and our youth group is in that separate Zoom room, and that can be conducted while the main service is going on. YouTube is a place where people can go and search for things. Maybe they want to search for a song, or they want to search for a church, or they want to see, oh, what was Sunday, June the 16th service at WHCC. It's like the second biggest search engine, I believe, in the world, second only to Google, which happens to own it too. We can tag these videos appropriately. So what that means is that we can put the date of our service, we can put the song name, we can put who the song's written by, so that when someone wants to find, you know, a particular song, they might stumble upon what we've done and they might be engaged by that process. Facebook. Now, Facebook's very interesting, and it's one that we've used as much as Zoom, if not more. And what we found with Facebook, it's a platform where our community already lives. So our community in Woodland Hills is generally on our Facebook page. They've come and liked the page. They're aware when we make posts. So if we're trying to reach our immediate community that we have now, Facebook would be a very important platform to make our content available, make our services available, like we currently are doing. The other one that I wanted to touch on was TikTok, which is probably regarded as a platform more for young kids. And what I've been finding on TikTok is you've got very big organizations that are very far from young kids on there that are realizing, and this was something that I only discovered recently, they're actually getting what are called undeserved views. And what that means is TikTok is still in a big growth phase where they're trying to get more people onto that platform and actually get them off YouTube, off Facebook, off Instagram. So TikTok still give you an exponential number of views. So Pastor Craig might do a sermon on that, and we might better edit a minute. And what that minute might get us is 500,000 views. Now, the only reason that would be called undeserved views is because we don't have that audience to give us that number of views. And so what I've found is that the smartest organizations and churches have started to use that platform because of that, because it's organic reach that the other platforms have grown beyond. So you used to be able to get that on Instagram. You could get that level of views from Instagram. You can't get it anymore. So what's regarded now as a more childlike platform where only young people live is being adopted on a much bigger scale.
Thanks so much, Wayne, for that. And I'm going to take us home, and then we'll stop the video and give you a chance to either send in your questions if you're looking at this on YouTube, or for those participants in the room, we'll open the microphones so you can ask questions. So you've heard a lot of the concepts, some of the mechanisms or platforms and all of that. I want to close tonight by sharing with you 8 simple things to keep in mind for what it means to go forward and how we can do it in a way that works for all of us and doesn't overwhelm us. This comes from our recent convergence training. So I'll share those screens. The first of the 8 principles they ask us to keep in mind is, number 1, keep it simple. There's a pressure that many churches feel of trying to aspire to be a Hillsong or a Saddleback, one of the megachurch ministries. And the reality is, not only can we not do that, but that's not who God has called us to be. So we have a way of introducing ourselves with simplicity, with integrity, and with authenticity. And that's why it's important to, number 1, keep it simple. Number 2, we need to remember the limits of what we have, both in terms of financial resources as well as volunteer service. And know also what it is that we're missing that we need to add in order to be an online presence. And we have been working for the last 6 weeks at WHCC to address that second matter. The third thing is get used to the fact that our worship leaders, including myself, will be making eye contacts with a variety of folks, both folks in the sanctuary as well as those viewing at home. For we can't preference one part of our hybrid community. We need to engage them all. The fourth thing, it's easy to think about the volunteers that we need on site or in person at the church, but they reminded us, don't forget your digital viewers as well. and recruit things like digital greeters to welcome folks into our Zoom room or our Facebook Live experience. The fifth thing they shared with us, Wayne has already talked about, which is don't worry as much about the aesthetics of hiding the camera or the equipment. For as Wayne said so well, the cameras and some of the equipment will be physical reminders of our worshipers who are online. The sixth thing they said, and something we're working on as we speak at WHCC, is they said one Sunday a quarter have a lay reader or worship leader that is coming to the community from online. But at WHCC, we're going to up that considerably. We'll regularly have worship pieces that will come from our online community, whether that be in the form of a special piece of special music or a lay reader or any number of ways, perhaps even a children's sermon. The seventh thing they ask us to remember is to not be afraid to try things that will help us integrate both the online and in-person experience. So we're already thinking about ways when we return of how we can do that with things like communion in the worship service or prayers of the people. And finally, and most importantly, remember that the hybrid model isn't just going to affect us during Sunday worship on Sunday morning at 10 a.m., that every aspect of our ministry must be looked at with new eyes as we ask ourselves, which of the four columns I referred to earlier will this ministry expression fit under? Will it be an online only, an online first, an in-person first, or in-person only? Again, I can't stress this most strongly enough, that every aspect of our ministry must intentionally be placed in one of those columns. So with that, I'm going to wind down our formal presentation and I'll stop recording. And those of you watching at home, you can email your questions into us at whccpastor@gmail.com. And for those in the room, in just a moment, we'll invite your questions. Thanks for being with us this June 14th of 2021. Have a blessed evening.